So I just recently got back from Las Vegas, and I was one of the ones who was able to get an actual hands-on for a couple days and shoot with the A7 III. You know, part of the announcement, everything that came out, there's a lot of excitement going on about this $2,000 camera. It's coming out in April, and it's selling. Its pre-orders are very, very well. I talked to a couple people from camera stores, and they are just like, man, these pre-orders are coming in. And it was interesting because Sony touted this as being the basic full-frame camera, and then they pretty much said, hey, you pretty much have like 50 to 60% of the A9, looks like an A7 Mark III, and here's just a couple little more things. You'll get login video, etc. You know, hey, it's basic, but it's really not. The pin post down below, I'm gonna link some of the behind the scenes stuff, the event and everything like that, so that way you could see us kind of just using the stuff and how everything's really situated, so check the pin post down below. But I just want to give my thoughts on my review on the A7 III. Now, it's not gonna be a typical review. I wanna talk about it. I had a very in-depth time with this camera, and I think I could just share a lot of information, so I'm gonna reference some notes here. But the A7 III is beyond basic in my opinion, and for $2,000, it really puts a lot of what Canon and Nikon are doing a little bit behind. Now, warning, I am a Canon user mainly right now. I've been Nikon a lot, basically my whole life, and I'm in the Fuji. I actually owned about a year and a half ago, the Sony A7 II before that broke, unfortunately. So that being said, the entry level is appealing to a lot of people, and for them to announce this around WPPI, which is the wedding photography event in Vegas, shows that they wanted to target wedding photographers, event photographers, and even that this can do 10 frames a second. You can even still get a little bit of sports out of this. Not that I would highly recommend it, it's just still pretty fast for what it is. Two of the biggest questions I got on these videos and everything throughout the process is, did the camera overheat? Now, I'm also going to link Max Urio's video down below because he did way more in-depth video testing, and he pretty much was doing all video cinematography down there. So on our end, you know, we tested this in 4K for like over an hour, trying on and off, and it didn't overheat. I think Max in his videos, he tried it for like an hour and a half, and then he kind of just gave up because it didn't overheat for him as well, but you could see a lot more from that. So no, we didn't get it to overheat. We didn't set the camera on fire to try to do so either. There's a lot of insane tests out there, so we could go from that. The other big question I got is that, does this have a low pass filter? And then it does not, according to the Sony tech. So no low pass filter, didn't give it to overheat, and you kind of already know who this is for. So a couple of things that really stuck out to me was that autofocusing system that you get from that A9. You essentially have full coverage, and it actually tracks amazingly. There were a lot of times where Sony set up the one event where there was like a bunch of rain and water coming down from the ceiling, and a lot of other cameras, if you go to autofocus or something like that and hunt, it would lock onto the water instead of the model's faces. And even using the 5-axis in-body stabilization in this A7 III, shooting at like an 1/8 to 10th of a second, the camera was able to stay on the two models' faces or the model's face and to really just lock on and say, this is the photo, this is what you're taking. And it didn't focus on the water. So all that being said, the autofocusing system is absolutely stunning within this camera. Didn't really find much fault with that. Then the next big thing is the eye autofocus, and how did that go? The eye autofocus is actually pretty good. I mean, you could be, I'm looking at my monitor, you could have, you know, the block right here track, and even if you kind of go off axis a little bit, it would actually follow the eye as well, and it did very decently. Now, what I did notice is that probably at about here, for that matter, the eye autofocusing would follow and stick on. But then if you got back a little bit further is when it really wouldn't do that well, and you would notice that, okay, maybe that didn't fully track. But if you're trying to get eye autofocusing from the back of a room, I think you're kind of doing it wrong. So in that regards, both of these worked. And I actually really enjoyed the A7 III EVF as well, the electronic viewfinder, because you almost had near blackout free. And the reason I say that is because you did get blackout, obviously, when you're kind of like laying in the frame. I really wanted to test to see how it was, you know, going full continuous, 10 frames per second. Of course, you saw blacking out going on, but it really was just splits of a second. I don't even know the approximate time, but you could still see what was going on, and you really weren't losing any of the action. And I want to quickly just talk about the battery life within the camera as well. It's using the newer Z battery, which I think everything now going forward will, because it is proven to last a lot longer compared to the other batteries. And that's a lot of lost allure, is people don't want to get into it because you're gonna buy all these batteries and they drain quickly. Now, that being said, Ted Forbes and I, who I went out there to help, we shot stills all day, 4K video, and the battery did decently well. Now, it still needs a little bit more for me so I could be a little bit more comfortable with it if I was to ever invest in something like this. But they rate it for 710 shots per charge. So if you're doing stills all day, it kind of isn't a big deal. But if you're doing 4K video, you're gonna need probably 2 or 3 if you're on a shoot all day, so that way you could be comfortable without having to worry about, you know, running out of battery. So battery life, pretty good. Tested on 4K. You know, you could go from a couple hours, 100% to maybe 30%, 20%, and as you're just churning out, turning on the camera, having the screen on, etc. You know, decent battery life. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the video as well, and this is what also surprised a lot more people besides the autofocusing system, is the versatility you have in video. You do have 4K and 24 frames a second and 30 frames a second, which I'll cover in 1 second, but they also gave you log profiles as well, which a lot of people were blown away with. You get S-Log 2 and 3, but you're getting about 8 bits, so the shadows can look a little bit blocky, but if you just overexpose a little bit to help compensate for that, you can kind of fight around that. But you are getting logs, so that way if you really want to grade something, you want a flatter image, you can do that, and you have a little bit more flexibility, which is pretty cool. But a lot of people are buying this for the maybe high frame rate at 1080 at 120 frames per second, or you're getting it for that 4K video at 24 and 30 frames. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, why isn't there 60 frames or something like that? That's probably gonna be the A7S III. You wouldn't be buying this camera solely just for video, I hope. It's a great hybrid for both. But with 30 frames per second, you are getting a crop. So yeah, you're getting a crop kind of like you're used to. But at 24 frames a second, you're able to use it non-crop at total 4K, and you're gonna have a good time with it. Plus 24 frames per second is pretty much what a lot of people shoot. I do shoot around 30, but you know, so if that's a big deal for you, you're gonna get a little bit more of a crop. Just something to keep in mind. Going around to the build quality and the ergonomics, essentially, like I was mentioning, is that it has the ergonomics of the A7R Mark III. So if you're used to that, it's good. It's got a decent grip. It's still a little tight around the lens mount and the actual grip of the camera, but that's not too bad. And it has a pretty good weather sealing. I did hear it's a little bit more plasticky towards the bottom, and it might not be as weather sealed, so keep that in mind. But some of the people at the event were saying that they've had it outside, it was raining or something like that. You know, it was like facing down on a black rapid strap, and it did absolutely fine. The other thing I wanted to go with is just some of the other quick things on the camera. So you do have a touchscreen in the back. It's not fully articulating. It's your typical one. You are limited a little bit on how you can tilt it down if you want to, you know, do a shot like this or something like that. So keep that in mind. It is semi touchscreen, so it's not full use. Like, and you can use it when you're using stills, but if you're trying to use the touchscreen for the menus or to pinch to zoom to see how your focus is, it's still not there, and I still don't know why they're limiting it to that. You know, it should be a common thing on all these cameras nowadays. I went to pinch to zoom and I was like, oh, come on, it's not there. But you have the faster dual SD card slots. You have your joystick in the back, which works absolutely well and should be a standard as well. And the movement of the record button, I like it where it's at. It's not at some weird part on the outside of the camera. It's at a very good point, very easy to access. You know where it is at all times. You can just like reach behind and hit it, and you're good to go. And if you're hoping the menu systems have improved, they have not. They're their same usual menus. Still very hard to navigate, they're clunky, and that's just a hopeful thing you hope that they fix. Lastly but not least, I want to talk about the dynamic range now. The photo editing profiles for the A7 III are not out yet, so we cannot use the raw files, but Sony claims that you have 15 stops of dynamic range with it, so that is pretty good compared to some of the stuff that Canon has been lacking with dynamic range wise, and someone like Nikon who does very well with DR as well. So I'll be very interested to see that. If you want to hear more about the DR, the A7 III, when these profiles become available, let me know down below. Maybe I'll make a separate video on those, even though I normally don't do those, but I'd be glad to share that information about the DR. And asking a lot of the other YouTubers and stuff that were at the event, the one common answer I got as I was talking about, you know, what do you think of the A7 III, is that I don't really have any complaints. And I guess that's really what kind of any company wants to hear for that, you know, for that matter. So I'm gonna link a couple other reviews and other YouTubers things down below. Once again, I worked with Ted Forbes on a lot of this stuff, so you see a little bit more video, and I think he might be doing a little bit more vlog stuff in his as well, as he covered our, you know, our time there as well. So link that down below for more of the video. Once again, Max Yuriv has great a video take on this as well, so I'll link that down below. But the stills you saw were shot at the event, and you know, we can go from there. The A7 III, I actually would highly recommend. The other question I got is, do I see myself, you know, selling everything to go to it? If I probably didn't have anything and I was really getting into the full frame market, you know, would I look into something like a D750 compared to a A7 III? You know, image quality wise, stills wise, the D750 is nothing to forget about. But video quality wise, the A7 III blows away a lot of what's out there right now. Especially if you want to get into the Sony game. You know, would you want to move from an A6500 to the A7 III? I think you'll find it will be an easy move. And you can shoot the A7 III in a crop mode and the quality is still fantastic. So if you're waiting on lenses or something like that, it will not be a hard move. But for $2,000, I think the camera is pretty well priced. Ball is in Canon and Nikon's court for this year to see what they do mirrorless wise or what they will announce. Because if not, Sony's going to have a big year in regards to the A7 III, possibly something bigger than the A9, and maybe, you know, the A7S III, which should have your 4K at 60 frames per second, hopefully non-crop. But I want to know your thoughts down below. What do you think of the A7 III? On two of the vlogs that I posted, the outpour of I'm excited for it and everything has been, you know, greatly noted, but this direct video, are you excited for the A7 III? Would you move from something like the A6300, the A6500 up to the A7 III? Or how about you have an A9? Do you not need the frames per second for that? And you're thinking, man, I could save almost $2,000 on it. It's half the price. Let me know your thoughts all down below. Sony's doing a lot of good stuff right now. Canon, I'm looking at you, 1DX Mark II right here. Let's see what we're gonna do next too as well.